All right, welcome back to the channel. So Terence Crawford's hardball negotiation tactics have left the Errol Spence Jr. Megafight in doubt, and the mainstream media seem to be extremely happy about it, and we know why. They don't want this type of fight to take place because this type of fight will change boxing for the better. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back. So we are going to continue to push on certain subjects on this channel. Welcome back. My name is Martin. This is Fanon International Boxing. Thank you guys for tuning in. Please make sure, if you're not subscribed, to subscribe and share the videos. But also, every morning at 8 a.m., we have a live stream where you can ask questions live. We have a great audience. Please make sure that you're there and support the live stream, which in the proceeds of that, the super chats go to support the promotions that we do for young up-and-coming fighters, foreign fighters, amateur fighters over on our Instagram page at Fanon Boxing. So make sure that you guys follow me on Fanon Boxing and Instagram. But let's get into the meat of this. The biggest fight of boxing, not in the heavyweight division, is Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford. In the welterweight division, two of the best fighters in the world. Almost everybody has both of these guys in their top 10 pound for pound. Many people have Terence Crawford number one. Many people have Errol Spence number one. It is the fight. This is a fight that is the size and the importance of Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns, Sugar Ray Leonard versus Marvin Hagler. It is as big, my opinion, it is as big a fight as any of those welterweight, middleweight fights that took place in the 1980s. This fight is that level of fight. Terence Crawford is an extraordinarily gifted athlete, an extraordinarily accomplished fighter that, doesn't necessarily have the massive fan base that, that he deserves because of the business side of boxing. But everything that Terence Crawford has done within the boxing ring, I don't think you people can find too much to say about him, other than, yeah, he may have got dropped, right, against the Calvin Aukes fight. He got wobbled against the Yuriorkis Gamboa fight, but that does not keep him from being a great fighter. You can look at Tommy Hearns, same thing has happened. Tommy Hearns has been knocked out, right? That's his kind of Achilles heel. It's like a great fighter, but hey, if you touch him on the chin the wrong way, you can get Tommy Hearns out of there. That did not keep the Sugar Ray Leonard versus Tommy Hearns fight, the first fight, from being a super classic fight. In fact, it made it even more so because Tommy Hearns was outboxing Sugar Ray Leonard pretty much the whole way until it got towards the end. I think that was a 15-round fight. So either in like the 14th or the 15th round, Sugar Ray Leonard started walking him down, caught him, got him out of there. Now the rest of the fights, the two other fights after that were pretty much all Hearns. Right before that, the knockdown happened, that fight was all Hearns. But that special combination of fighter, that dog and Sugar Ray Leonard, it made for a classic fight. And that is what we're looking at with Terence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. Now, I have my own belief about how this negotiation's going. And at the end of it, I believe that this fight is going to happen. These guys both want this fight. But the conversations that we're going through are ones that encourage the media to trash the fight. That's the only downside, really, of all of this back and forth going on between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford. Because if you look at it, like, aside from what they're saying on this particular instance, but if you look back at both of their history of negotiating fights with other people, you'll see that both of these guys have a track record of being pretty flexible when it comes to making fights that they really want to have made. One example for Terence, for example, with Terence Crawford, when he was going to fight at 140 pounds for the undisputed title, Julius Ndungo already had a mandatory challenger or a fight that he's supposed to have with Sergey Lipinets. And what did Terence Crawford do? Terence Crawford and I do believe Ndungo both paid an extra $150,000. And at the time, I believe that Terence Crawford was earning somewhere around the $1 million range, $1.5 million for the fight. And maybe he was at $2 million, but at $150,000, giving up that much is a good 10%, 10% of your fee. to make sure that that fight happens. That's an example of Terence Crawford coming out of his pocket for money to make a fight happen that he wanted to have happen, that he found that he thought was important, right? If you've listened to pretty much any other, conversations around Terence Crawford making fights, you almost never hear him complaining about the money that he's making in the fight. And that I've never really heard that be a hurdle to a fight that he's made, right? Versus, and I'm not chastising him. I think he's making very good decisions for himself. But versus like Teofimo Lopez, like where Teofimo Lopez is heavily negotiating for more money for each of the fights that he gets out of Top Rank, right? He's taken fights to, like he did with Triller, taking that fight from the fight with Kambosos to a purse bid, right? And forcing that extra amount of money to come out. And this is the second fight he did it in a row, right? Increased his salary from like 1.5 million guaranteed to 2.5. He did that 2 fights in a row. So, but have you ever heard of Terence Crawford really digging in and doing that? I've never heard of it. I've seen, for me, it seems like he is pretty laissez-faire with his negotiations as long as he feels like he is getting, that he's going to be a wealthy man off of it. He's never been really one to fuss before, right? Now, why is he fussing now? Obviously, there's some pride going into this with him feeling like he deserves 50% of the fight with Errol Spence, right? But even look at Errol Spence and say, well, is Errol Spence Jr. ever been a particularly difficult person to negotiate with? And I would say that he has not. In fact, if you look at what happened with both the Mikey Garcia fight and the Sean Porter fight, I think you'll see that he's not very difficult to negotiate with. Specifically with the Sean Porter fight, my understanding is, did not think that was a pay-per-view fight. He wanted that fight to be on regular Fox because he was like, look, I don't know, if this fight because Sean Porter's not that big a draw, I don't really know if it's in my interest to take a chance on going to pay-per-view when I could just get a really big guarantee, right? And Sean won't get as big a guarantee, but I'll get a big guarantee if we just put the fight on Fox or Showtime, right? But Sean Porter was very persistent about it, wouldn't take the fight unless it was on pay-per-view. So he relented, everybody relented. Errol Spence Jr. went on ahead and made the fight, right? Even with Danny Garcia was a mandatory. Errol didn't have to take that fight, but Errol went on ahead and made the fight. So if you look at the two histories of these guys separately, you'll see that they're both fairly reasonable individuals, right, who will work with people to make fights happen. But in this particular instance, what I think is happening is because we know that there's a certain amount of things that need to take place before that fight, right? So, for example, Errol Spence Jr. had, he said a plan to clean out his side of the division, and he's one fight away from that with Yordenis Ugas. Terence Crawford has been taking care and winning the fights with the people that have been put in front of him. Now, I believe that the fight's going to ultimately happen, but the thing that gets me about it is the almost celebratory attitude about this with the boxing media. And I've actually heard somebody say, well, this is Floyd Mayweather Jr. teaching Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford how not to make a fight. No, man. The difficulty with that fight comes with the fact that these networks are splitting up the sport of boxing. That you have to go through all kind of loops with ESPN and Fox to make these fights happen, right? And Terence Crawford is with Top Rank. So Top Rank, ESPN want him to promote their fights, right? And they've been using him as a workhorse over there on ESPN for a while, using him as the guy that is going to get the ratings while you're selling other fighters that have not proven themselves, right? Like Teofimo Lopez. Look at the amount of publicity that they give Teofimo Lopez versus Terence Crawford, and Terence Crawford is most definitely a bigger name than he is, right? But you just don't get the same push, right? So the boxing media, I'm telling you, I don't believe that they want fights between black American fighters, local American fighters being huge events, because that's going to shift the focus of boxing back into the domestic fight scene, which is where the focus should be. We should be focusing on guys from the United States fighting guys from the United States. If we do that, we're going to grow boxing in the United States. If we grow boxing in the United States, then other people will come and have fights here as well, but it'll be an even better environment for them to do so. For us to continue to push foreign fighters over American fighters, celebrate fights that ain't even going to be made, like like Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, which is completely a pipe dream considering Tyson Fury's actually in court, but then act like there's some big issue and it's not even that big a deal if Errol Spence Jr. fights Terence Crawford. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think. And with that, I'm out. Peace.